Hi, I'm Mark Wilkinson. I'm here with Lewis Senior. Good morning, Lewis. How are you?
Good. Well, a little bit of a cold, but looking forward to our discussion.
Yes, indeed. You sound fine, so we're all good. Let's talk about E-Colours and Equilibria, your company. What were you doing when you first started E-Colours?
I had been working in oil and gas for about 30 years and started to see so many people over time getting hurt, maimed, and killed. And I really wanted to find something which I thought was missing. And so we started looking at how people could get hurt, etc., from a personality perspective. And that was the driver for starting the Equilibria and the E-Colours.
So you were working offshore. You were head of safety for Transocean, correct?
Yes.
A huge worldwide drilling company. And you were seeing too many people essentially hurt, maimed, or killed. And what gave you the idea from the personality perspective? How did that come about?
We had been working on a rig in Nigeria that was working for a large major oil company. They'd had a fatality a previous year. The next year, unfortunately, somebody got hurt one evening, had his fingers chopped off. They decided to fly him into town to get looked after. And unfortunately, the helicopter on the way into town crashed. The pilot died, co-pilot died, person who got hurt died, and the person who was sent in to look after him died. And the operator shut the rig down and said, "You're not going back to work until you can prove you can work incident-free," which, as you can imagine, under those circumstances, is very, very trying. So I was sent over there to try and help out. I thought the oil company did a great job in actually shutting the operation down and refused to go back to work until we were able to prove we could work safely throughout the rest of the contract. And sitting with the crew one night, I'd already been looking at what were we missing, or trying to understand what we were missing. And the conversation came around. I literally got with the crew and asked them, "So, well, what are your strengths? What we used to call improvement opportunities?" And actually, the other question I was asking is, what motivates you? Because why would somebody put themselves in a situation where they could get hurt? And a gentleman called Kevin Bartow, who I thank every year when I see him on Facebook for his birthday, he said, "Well, why don't you ask us the obvious question?" And I said, "What's that?" He said, "Why don't you ask us how we can get hurt?" And the moment, and the first person to answer, we'd already done a little bit of work from the old disc program about, how the how colors and personality matches up. And he said, "Well, you know me, Lewis, I'm a yellow blue. I can get hurt jumping in to help." And the minute he said that, he just started sending alarm bells off in my head, because we had somebody killed a couple of years earlier on another rig in the North Sea. Obviously, as it turned out, he was predominantly yellow blue, so as somebody else jumping in to help. And from there, that was enough for me. I said to Transocean, "Look, I want to start bringing this to a whole other level." And they said, "Well, we're not ready for it, but what we think you should do is start your own company, and we'll support you for the first 3 years and get you going." And they absolutely did. And here we are 20 years later to tell the tale.
That's brilliant. And what a great story. And Kevin Bartow, you said. I always forget the gentleman's name, and I will never forget that after this discussion, Kevin Bartow, because, we've got a lot to be grateful to Kevin for actually prompting you to connect these dots and then obviously move forward from there. So, how did you link safety to personality style? You'd already started to understand people more, and you were starting to, disc profiling and other different tools are out there, which we'll talk about later. But you started to ask people these questions that we now work with in a market research basis, I guess.
Yeah, well, on every level. Starting at the time, I had made my mind up a couple of years earlier that I was going to go ahead and start a company with some other people who wanted to start with me, one of which is Paul Grant, who's still with us today, obviously. And I had been sent the last couple of years. I wasn't actually in the HSE position when these fatalities happened. I'd already moved on and had started coaching some of the managers around the world. And most of the managers that we had were very technically competent, and some of them always said they'd like a little bit more coaching in terms of their leadership and interpersonal skills. So I was literally going around the world with these managers We'd go out to a rig, we'd sit with the crews, we'd have 12 flip chart posted up on the wall, basically breaking down the colors into red, yellow, red, blue, red, green, green, red, green, blue, green, yellow, etc. And we just start asking questions. What are your strengths? Again, we used to call them improvement opportunities, and a couple of other questions. And what I realized very quickly is wherever we were going in the world, I remember being in Abidjan in West Africa, in Thailand, in Australia, the answers were coming out exactly the same, even in the same order. Mm-hmm. And so the predictability probably was one of the first things that really started to amaze me. And then we just started to build up from there. So literally when we started Equilibria, we had one single laminated card which said how I could get hurt. And by that time, we had enough information. We had 5 answers to each one of the 12 E-Colour combinations. And we happily pranced into BP, British Petroleum. That's the only thing we had. And actually, while we were there, the oil company happened to be Chevron, who had the rig in Nigeria, said, hey, come on back to us. We see what you're doing. We've seen the results. I mean, they went from fatalities to 0 incidents over a 3-year period. And a new vice president came in who saw what we were doing. He said, I want this on every rig that we work around in the world. And Mark, as you can imagine, it just grew from there.
Yeah, that's wonderful. And just being able, from a health and safety perspective in a high-risk industry, to be able to be proactive enough to, not be looking at this in accident investigations and saying, procedure and personality came into it and that's why there was a problem. Actually doing it up front with people so that we don't end up in those places is what every health and safety person would like to have in their toolkit. And actually,
absolutely,
for you to be actually have been doing this for some years in this high risk, industry, I think is fantastic. And as we say, anecdotally and statistically, we can back these discussions up because it becomes very interesting when you see the improvement opportunities in every single company. As far as industries go, what sort of industries and what sort of places of E-Colours? Because obviously it started in health and safety with these questions: how you can get hurt, what makes it difficult for someone to have a safety conversation, and obviously procedurally, people following procedures or not following procedures. Started in health and safety, and then it's gone out further.
Oh, it's stretched. I was actually making it yesterday for your practitioners. Actually, I was putting together, a kind of summation of not only where all of the history comes from, which I think is worth talking about later. And I'll just read off the list that I wrote for myself yesterday. So we started in oil and gas. And when we're talking about oil and gas, as you can imagine, that's got arms and legs on it as well, because you've got upstream, downstream, midstream. We're working with double PhDs who are inventing the next renewable type of fuel, to people working on rig floors, to people working in refineries, lubrication plants, etc. The next kind of big one for us was when we partnered with an organization called Fisher IT, where we have married the science of human and organizational performance with the personality diversity indicator and how that works together. And we're into electrical, power generation, aerospace, all of the kind of different industries, manufacturing. Anywhere people are looking to improve safety, quality, and reliability has a big part to play in it. We've had some phenomenal experiences along the way. I have to say, thanks to, and they won't mind me mentioning it, thanks to Chevron. They walked us into school systems where we actually start with the E-Colours at 7 years old. And Mark, you've been in this business long enough to know that lots of times what people, if they decide if they're going to like to use your technology or not, they want the data, So yes, if an area's had an incident or an accident or worse, a fatality, and you can go in and within 6 months, you can show major change, as you've done in Transdev, for example, that's fantastic. But sometimes it's difficult to measure the culture, even though you know that the E-Colours and the associated tools are making a difference. In schools, it's really simple. They have lots of KPIs that are much clearer for people. So truancy, visits to the principal, bullying, graduation rate. So just to give you an idea, in a typical school where we work, In the States, for example, the average graduation rate is 78.2%. Every school we worked in got to 99 to 100%.
Yeah.
So, and that kind of carries through. We do a lot of work in sports world. I made a note for myself. It's something probably we've never even mentioned, but we do a lot of work with veterans. And when I say veterans, I mean military veterans. The average rate of suicide for veterans in the US is 22 a day. I was listening to a program yesterday, actually, on the BBC podcast that, and I don't know if you heard it, but the nursing in the UK, in the healthcare system, are 23% higher suicide rate than the average suicide rate in the UK. And a lot of times what we're finding, I was actually having a call with an organization who had nurses last night, giving them the power of the E-Colours, and also, which I know we'll talk about in a while, is personal intervention, this pause and play, and being able to press pause when you need to and press play when you want to. It could make a huge difference. So those are some of the areas we've worked in. I just ran a conference for the International Trauma Center a couple of weeks ago, where we had people from all over the world. They say that the average fatality rate between the back of an ambulance and the ER, because of miscommunication, is 3 to 5 deaths a day. Mm-hmm. So imagine if you've got people all being able to communicate in a way that everybody understands exactly what the other person is, saying. It is absolutely huge.
Absolutely. And I know construction suicide rates here in the UK are phenomenally high. And it's definitely something that is on the radar of the HSC here. So, yeah, absolutely. And we are talking to schools and the NHS here in the UK in order to find our way with those organisations so that we can help. As Top Colour Yellows, you and I both like to jump in and help, Lewis. Do we not? So we want to help. Of course we want to help, and we believe we have a tool that can help. Let's talk about E-Colours being for everybody, because a lot of other personality tools, which we'll talk about in the history part, a lot of these personality tools are kept for the leadership. Whereas I believe that E-Colours is for everybody. Is that an ethos that's come from Equilibria?
Well, for us, I literally wrote it down. It's from the CEO to the janitor. It's from the principal of a school to a 7-year-old kid. So absolutely should be for everybody. And that's the way we set up from the beginning. Our vision in Equilibria is realizing potential. And our core value is people first. And it doesn't matter if you're a little person or you're a middle-aged person or you're an older person. There is something for everybody. And it would be a great shame if other people, and you're right, lots of organizations only do it with the leaders, and then they wonder why it's not taking, effect and impact that they'd actually like it to have. So we're very much in believer in making ourselves very understandable to a point when we started working with schools and we're actually had E-Colour champions from about the age of 10 and onwards. They turned around to me one day in a school system in Houston and said, we all love the E-Colours, but it's all in adult language. So I said, okay, you all come in at the weekend and let's put it into your language. And we did. And we have those versions, as well. So, and Mark, the amount of people, both in industry, whatever walk of life they're in, or from a school, who've gone home and discovered the E-Colours with the whole family is a game changer.
I am one of those people.
as I well know. And as you well know, a lot of programs could be the most phenomenal safety program, for example, in the world. The minute people walk out of the door at work or the factory gate or whatever, that's where it stays. Whereas this thing tends to live with you throughout every walk of life.
Absolutely. And what I want to be clear on that as well is I get certain people will talk about price and budget and look at that as a potential limiter. One of the things I find with us working together is that we're adaptable to that. We will price point at every single level so that everybody can experience and taste the E-Colours and find out their personality style and those of the personality style around them. And I find that open for everybody, which I love.
Absolutely.
So let's talk a bit about the history. history of personality diversity, the 4-quadrant model. Other products are available, of course. Let's talk about the history, and then we'll talk about the differences.
Okay, so first of all, I will start with something I wrote down for your practitioners yesterday. Personality styles and recognizing the way we do today is a little bit like serving old wine in new bottles. If you go back in history, the Chinese about 4,000 years ago were the first people apparently to recognize that there were 4 basic personality styles, which they just classified as earth, wind, fire, and water. If you go through a little bit of the history, Hippocrates, the Greek physician, and now you're talking 460 BC, he actually related the different personality styles through fluids, through the body fluids. And then Galen, in about 129 AD, following kind of Hippocrates' theory of temperaments, he actually went to the different fluids, which were melancholic, phlegmatic, optimistic, and choleric. So again, breaking it down into the 4. Fast forward to the 1920s, and a lot of people who will tell you, like the father of psychology was a guy called Carl Gustav Jung. And he came up with the 4 archetypes as Apollo, trickster, wise old man, and wise old woman, and wounded healer. Why he went to those, I'm not quite sure. But again, and he actually wrote a book about it. I won't try and pronounce the German, but it's Psychological Types. That was written in 1921. And here's something that is really interesting. And I just found out this yesterday. I'd never actually known before. A lot of people, and you've had it already, Mark, will come to you and go, oh, you've got the E-Colours? Well, we've done Myers-Briggs. What I did not know until yesterday is Briggs and Myers actually I'll read it for you because I got it. Briggs and Myers began creating the MBTI indicator during World War II in the belief that the knowledge of personality preferences would help women entering the industrial workforce for the first time identify the sort of wartime jobs that would be the most comfortable and effective for them. And this is really interesting because when we started Equilibria, we made a very conscious decision and do it several times a week. We do not consider the E-Colours a profiling system to put people into a job, task, responsible situation, etc. We are who we are. We need to celebrate that. So, when people say, what's the difference between you and Myers-Briggs? There's your answer. And actually, they've been hammered sometimes over the years because of that, because there are companies today who will find out their personality and either hire them or not. That's not what we're about.
No, absolutely not. And I have had that myself in the past where a similar tool was used against me. And they employed, I was a yellow-blue in E-Colours at the time, and they employed the more detailed green and the more detailed and task-orientated green-red. And they even told me that. They even said, look, you're inspirational, you can be a great leader, but we're looking for the detail person. And it was used against me and I didn't get the job. And I never felt good about that. And then obviously, as I learned more and more about E-Colours, the ethics behind it are very, very powerful. And for it to be used in the way that it is used, as in not against people, in fact, quite the opposite, realize your potential, find out where your strengths are, find out where your percentages are in the 4 quadrants, play to your strengths, manage your potential limiters and become a better version of yourself is a wonderful ethos and something that I've been working on prior to meeting you 10 years ago or more. But actually, using now the E-Colours as a tool to improve myself and all my clients is very, very powerful.
Yeah, absolutely. Now, as you well know, since Myers-Briggs, obviously, there's been lots of different companies that have created their own system, as did we. And fantastic. I mean, as I made a note yesterday, again, of getting something ready for your practitioners, we owe all of the people right from the Chinese 4,000 years ago, thank you, because we have taken some of that knowledge, and I like to think what we've done today is made it simple. That's one thing that I think everybody here will tell you loves about the E-Colours. They are sticky. Nobody ever forgets what the E-Colour combination is. It goes through them for life. And it's memorable and it's applicable. And when people ask me what's the difference between your system and others, to me, it's all around the practical applications. One thing is to know yourself. You know, you can go back to know thyself. That's a long time ago. But then again, what do you do with the information? And that's what I have a lot of gratitude for, is we've been given the opportunity through many of our clients, actually, to be able to expand the knowledge in ways we never even dreamed of when we started Equilibria.
And the thing I really like about you and all of us is that we're always learning.
Yep.
Every day is a school day. You know, you learned something yesterday. You know, we're not here to define people and say, these are your colours, this is your personality, you are stuck with that. We're actually here to say, here's the indicator. Now let us understand a bit more about you. And when we talk about these subjects that we have in our amazing booklet and our intentional communication guide and our wristbands and all these other products that we have at our fingertips, how could I get hurt? What makes it difficult for me to stop the job or have a difficult conversation? What makes it difficult for me to follow procedures? How to address that procedural challenge is a wonderful piece of work. And then how could I disrupt teamwork and how teamwork is disrupted in me? Essentially, those points are massively valuable in any organization. And then you can go on in the booklet about when working with me, you know, effective forms of recognition, the amount of work you've done over the years to make this work. You know, how can I make errors? Amazing, absolutely amazing. And such a great conversation stimulator with every single individual that I've ever encountered with this. And I continue to learn every day as well. So, you know, I'm grateful to you for what you've done. And also, as you say, we're all grateful to all of these other tools, which all have value. We just believe that our E-Colours system, with the market research has gone on from a high-risk industry, actually has the power to save lives. And we can back that up, as we've said, anecdotally and statistically.
The beauty, I think, is you get to understand yourself, you get to understand others, because a lot of the systems actually are very much focused on the individual. What we talk about is self-team and other awareness, because you can be very self-aware, but if you're not aware of how that impacts other people, you're not going to get very far. But the real key is you know, the most economical tool we've got, which is a wristband, and yet it's huge. So as yourself, I'm predominantly yellow-red. I have a pause button, I have a play button. I was stunned when a few 16-year-olds a few years ago came up to us and said, we were going to commit suicide last Saturday and decided to press our pause button. And that's when you begin to realize that it may sound simple, but giving people that tool in a lot of organizations, not only in schools, they call this a coping tool.
Yeah.
So you've only got to look at the news this morning and see what's going on around the world. How does a human being cope with all of the stuff that's happening, some of which you wish you could do something about, and some of which you know you can do nothing about? But to get through that the psychological challenges that challenge any human being today needs to have some kind of methodology of managing everything that's going on around them. And it would appear this is a very useful tool to help that along.
Yes, I would agree with that. And it's a great observation. Just being able to hit your pause button. In fact, some of the people I coach, many of the people I work with, they'll actually sit there and physically put their hand or their finger onto their pause button so that they don't overtalk as you and I would, or they don't overthink as Top Colour Greens would do. You know, very, very important that we understand the uses that we can have here to make us better individuals. From my own perspective, when I first discovered E-Colours, I was bankrupt and just looking for some work. And within 3 years, I was on a 6-figure salary. And that was all from learning my own strengths and my own potential limiters and then putting that into practice. Not necessarily in the HSC in the behavioural safety way, although I did go into HSC, but it changed my life because it helped me realize, one, it's good to be me because there's lots of other people that are like me as a yellow blue at the time. It also taught me that there's 11 other personality styles in the E-Colours world that I needed to know how to communicate with. I thought I was a good communicator before, probably because I spoke a lot and talked a lot. But actually, what I came to realize was that understanding these other personality styles in the E-Colours world, I could be a more effective communicator if I understood that play and pause button. So, yeah, it was vitally important for me. Is personality really predictable?
There's a lot more to us than just our personality. And as you've already referred to the pocketbook, it's worth understanding that if you look at the analogy that we use around us as human beings as an iceberg, then the personality is that piece above the water, which is a much smaller piece than the larger piece below the water. The piece above the water represents our personality. That lower piece represents our character. And typically, we react instinctively from our personality, and we respond probably with a little bit more thought through our character. And so the personality side of it, I never thought of it in this way before, but it would appear, because of the data that we have, that personality is a lot more predictable than character, if you think about it. Because as you mentioned, with the questions that we've got here, how could I get hurt? What makes it difficult for me to stop the job? How could I disrupt teamwork, etc.? None of this is invented by us. This is millions of inputs from people in 29 different languages, typically answer even in the same order. Yeah. So again, it would appear that there is some predictability within personality, but it's going to be impacted by the context of what's going on at the time and the character of each individual, because we are all different.
Absolutely. Yeah. And it is a fascinating conversation starter, because each different personality style responds in a different way. So all the top color yellows are like, yeah, this is exactly me. Some of the top color reds will be like, no, this is not me, and actually this is how it is. And they might tell us that, where the greens and the blues and the greens might agree with some of it and then want to discuss it more and bring out more conversational pieces. Overall, it's the best thing I've ever seen to get people to open up, which is ultimately what we need to do as human beings, to acknowledge our personality, to manage our personality, and then respond from our character. Wouldn't it be great if everyone in the world knew about this?
Oh, I mean, that's been my dream since the day we started. In fact, I know we're going to talk a little bit about legacy. I would just love it. And I'm sure we haven't found the key to the kingdom yet. But again, I go back to what's going on in the world today. A lot of it is because people just aren't listening to what the other people are trying to tell them. And so, and that's another thing I want to mention, Mark. So the E-Colours is so foundational. You can see behind me here. It's it's really then feeds into what we call intentional leadership or intentionality, because now you're aware of your E-Colour combination. Now you're aware of others. You can have and be a lot more intentional in the way you go about through life. And I got to tell you, I had a call with Jack and his lovely wife the other day. Your superstar, by the way, who is doing his best to emulate Mark Wilkinson, which I thought was a wonderful thing to hear. But listening to him and his green-blue, his wife was predominantly green-blue, and how it's helped them in their relationship and through a bit of a sticky patch, and how they understand each other today. And I understand that her mum is predominantly red-yellow. I've talked to her as well. Listening to that dynamic is a whole different conversation to people sitting in front of a marriage counselor wondering why they can't get on with each other.
Yes, absolutely. I mean, my wife and I have the same personality traits as Jack and Stacey, and Penny, Stacey's mother, I used to go to school with and sit behind in school. So yes, but my wife and I'm a yellow-red personality traits, and my wife is green-blue. And there is a potential for those personality styles to clash. And actually the appreciation of the fact that we actually complete one another in many ways, where Emma is strong on the thinking, I do less of that. And where I'm strong on the engaging, she does less of that. but actually between us, we make a formidable team. Understanding that and appreciation, and I can see that in Jack and Stacey and many, many other people. I had one gentleman that I took through the E-Colours in a behavioural safety course who leant back in his chair and said, I finally understand why I'm on my third marriage, which it was quite fun.
Yeah.
He was in his mid-60s and he was like, oh, why didn't I know about this when I was 20? So no, but here we are. So we keep doing our best, right? And another thing, I asked you the question, obviously, about is personality really predictable? I have to share this story. I recently ran a workshop and I had a 25-year-old young Sikh lad and a 65-year-old white gentleman from down the road from Heathrow, both blue reds, completely different characters, completely different cultures, totally different ages, absolutely couldn't be further apart, you know, in their ways and the way they've been brought up and what they've learned and everything else. Both blue reds, and they're sitting there just talking to each other about their strengths and potential limiters. And it was just a wonderful thing to observe, because it proves what we're talking about, which is ultimately the key. Because when we can understand each other from a personality perspective, there are 8 billion people on the planet. 1.3 million people so far have done the E-Colours questionnaire, the personality diversity indicator. And the amount of positivity and positive energy that it's created, I think, is something that you can be really grateful for. So let's talk about coaching and coaching support, because E-Colours can be used as an awareness tool, and we use it as an awareness tool for people. But then you can actually go on. I use it as a life coach, a success coach, and a business coach. You've used that as a corporate coach, an executive coach. Tell us a bit more about that.
Well, it's a foundational tool, regardless. You know, if you think about even I mean, it's just for what it's worth. People keep telling me, they get mixed up between mentoring and coaching. And so my understanding, and again, you go back to, you know, however you get your information, but mentoring was literally Telemachus going off to war and telling his friend, I want you, Mr. Mentor, to teach my son everything you know. And that's what mentors do, is they teach people everything they know. Whereas the history of a coach comes from, actually, it's a Hungarian word for a coach, which is a vehicle to get you from where you are to where you want to be. So imagine how effective it is if whoever you're working with, you can provide them with a vehicle of where they want to be in a very efficient manner, because you know more about their personality than they even know themselves. And that's why I think, you know, one thing is, you, as you well know, you can find out your E-Colours, but this premium report that we've developed that really digs into learning a lot more about the individual, it is fundamental to start a coaching program. And literally this week, I've had a couple of calls with people who went, again, just like you said before, I wish I'd known this before, and I wish I'd known it was available before. So I find that, and I was coaching a very, 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 very smart group of people a couple of weeks ago, who are literally the strategic team behind a major oil company. And what they hadn't learned was the E-Colours, funnily enough. And so they were struggling to connect with the senior leaders because they had not appreciated their E-Colours. And so within 2 hours, talking about each leader and their E-Colours, they go, I'm giving them too much green information, where one of them predominantly red, yellow, just, you know, give me the bottom line and I'll work out the rest for myself that day. Or even better, you'll work out the rest and just tell me what I need to do. So it works at every level, Mark.
Yeah, absolutely does. Yes. And I've often found as well that sometimes we might get a bit of doubt and resistance at the start point when we start to introduce this idea or discuss it with people. And sometimes people that have done some of these other tools previously are like, oh, well, we've done that. And the question then is, okay, so what do you continue to do with that? Oh, I don't know, I did it and I'm kind of forgotten about it. And, you know, my question to you would be, do you believe that E-Colours adds value even when other tools have been used previously?
Very much so. But let me start with the doubt and resistance. If we're running a workshop, for example, with a group of people who you don't know from Adam, but, you know, the organization has brought you in to work with them, I would be extremely worried if everybody in the room goes, yeah, I'm all in right from the, 'cause life's not like that, right? So I actually welcome the doubt and resistors because they're the ones that actually will go through the change curve a lot more than somebody like, us, who tends to buy into something like this almost immediately. And so I make it very clear to people at the beginning, I am very happy there are people here who are doubtful. And by the way, we're not here to change your life. I never, ever, ever tell people this will change your life. But Mark, as you well know, and you've experienced, you actually are helping to change people's life. But you've got to let them work that out for themselves. On the other side of it, whatever they've done up to the point that you get involved, great. I did mention the other day, though, even if somebody's done Enneagram or DISC or Insights or the 16 personalities or MBTI, I'm really happy you've done that, but we want to just set the level playing field for everybody in the room here. So this is how the E-Colours are used. And typically when they start to see, I think I mentioned it the other day, the first thing that probably catches their attention is we start with the iceberg. Because now we're not just talking about personality, we're talking about the whole human being, step one. Then we show them the wells, where people very quickly realize you've got these 4 different E-Colours. If you imagine they're in wells, the wells that are full, that personality style, highly accessible. The lower ones need to be accessed. Next, how do you access? Well, you introduce personal intervention. To the best of my knowledge, we're the only company that does this personal intervention stuff. I'm not saying others won't pick up on it, but remember where you saw it first, type thing, right? And then the other thing is having a set of ethics. So, for example, we have probably, I don't know, several times a week, HR companies come along. We want to use your system for profiling. Sorry, we don't have a values match here. That's not what we do. But please get in touch with these companies. Would absolutely love to hear from you. And to me, obviously, everybody's doing something in their own way to help people along. I just think, again, one of the beauties of what we do is we're continually gathering data in our what I call our data lake, which I believe is pretty deep lake right now. And the way that we're able to apply the information is growing every day. We're literally, every 2 or 3 weeks, we're coming up with something new, which just helps a little bit more from what we knew before. We have gathered and have got infographics on caring. So how do people care and how do they like to cared for? Everything I'm telling you here is through the lens of the top colors. All right. Communication styles, delegation, empathy, frustration, how to influence, leadership styles, listening guide, planned engagements, procedural adherence, procrastination, psychological safety, recognition, resolving conflict, respect, response matters, stopping the job, stress. These are all things, actually, these are some of the things that we've done a tremendous amount of work on to make sure that everybody gets what they need, understanding those elements.
That leads me nicely into just asking you about the new communication tools that you're working on at the moment. Are you happy to just talk a little bit about those and the different reports that are being worked on?
Recently, and again, it came from a client, interestingly enough, very bought into the E-Colours. And he said to me, I would actually like to have a much deeper understanding of not only my own personal styles, etc., which you can get in the premium report, 33-page report, but I'd like to understand the people I'm working with to the same level. So we have, for the last few months, been working on what we call the E-Colours Interactive Alignment Report, and now have 144 reports, which we just started. I mean, in the next few days, you'll be able to actually go online and get them. But I just ran it past a couple of people, and fair enough, I actually sent a couple to the guy who first asked me about it. He said, I'm predominantly green-red. I have somebody who's predominantly red-green, somebody who's red-blue, and here's an interesting one, and somebody who's also green-red. So the same E-Colours as him. And we even have a report for that. So how does somebody who's green-red have the interaction with a green-red? Excuse me. I sent him the report, wrote back to him the next day. He said, Lewis, I've been doing performance management discussions at the end of the year for years. the quality of the discussions we had yesterday, quite remarkable. Never seen anything like it in my life. Great. So that's one tool we're working on. Another tool, that's finished. Another tool that we're now working on is there are many times where people will go, well, I know my E-Colours, but I don't know the E-Colours of the person that I want to interact with. Now, we do have some simplistic tools around that. For example, when we had the privilege of teaching the 10,000 volunteers when the Super Bowl was in Houston, all we gave them was this. So this is a kind of high level, not about guessing somebody's E-Colours. Yeah, exactly the same thing. Not about guessing somebody's colours, but at least realizing the 4 personality styles need to be discussed with at a different level, if you like. Well, this guy obviously wanted a lot more. So what we've now done is we are going to provide you a system, and we're working on it now. It'll be ready in a couple of months, where you'll be able to plug in different points that you are seeing and observing. And from that, you'll quickly get an answer back. Well, it looks like it, appears to be the tendencies of this person are probably somewhat like a yellow-red, for example. So you need to start communicating like this. So it's not about guessing somebody's E-Colours, because that's in the ethics. But now you're feeding what you might call our AI light system. You put the observations in, it will give you a good guide.
Brilliant.
On how to deal with that person.
And that's going to be really, really useful when you're in a situation that potentially you're finding challenging, and you need some help. So, yeah, I mean, that's what this is about: coaching, assistance, helping people communicate with one another. Brilliant. Thank you, Lewis.
Mark, can I just add 2 more things before we go on? So then you've got this, which is the Intentional Leadership book. And one of the beauties of this, from a coaching perspective, and I know that you're going to be taking this around sooner or later, is what we call the 8 essentials of high performance teams, which is fundamental to any organization, be it sports team, hospital, anywhere where there's people interacting with each other. And it's all this is all built through the lens of the E-Colours. So yes, you can go online and buy 100 books about things that an organization needs to have. But as far as I know, we're the only people doing it through personality perspective. And this is fresh off the press yesterday. I'm actually off to Qatar on Monday morning to work with Qatar Gas. And what we're looking at here is what we call the Aero Intentional Leadership book. So in here, you've got the science of human performance amalgamated with our personality diversity technology. I guarantee you there's nobody else in the world who's got anything like this. People will tell you this is 20 years ahead of its time. But 20 years ago, they were telling me the E-Colours is 20 years ahead of its time. And that's all going to be available to all of your people, as you well know, as they learn more and more about this.
Absolutely. Which leads me nicely into other trainers, health and safety trainers or coaches or success coaches, anyone who's out there that has any kind of interest in training others and training human beings. How do they become practitioners themselves?
So there's a whole process in place, which actually, I think you're as familiar with it as I am. So why don't you take the ball on that one?
Okay. So I am now one of the lead trainers alongside your son, David Senior. We can take practitioners through a 9-hour training course plus an extra 2 hours that they would then need to go and deliver with a client. And we want to make sure that people can taste E-Colours. At the end of the day, we would like you to embed it in your company. We would like you to embed it in your business, and we'll support you in that way. This is not about my ego or Lewis's ego or anything else. In fact, as Top Colour Yellows, myself and Lewis included, our entire goal in life, our overwhelming goal in life, is to help others. Sometimes we must hit our pause button so that it's not to our own detriment. However, we believe in this system. We believe in the fact that it has the ability to change people's lives when they decide that the time is right. It also has the ability to keep people safe and improve teamwork. With all of that in mind, it's a tool that you need in your business. So if you would like to become an E-Colours practitioner, whatever form of work you're in, As we said, football, NHS, anywhere in between, schools, etc. If you want to become a practitioner, we're only too happy to support you in that and give you the benefit of our experience and Lewis's 25 plus years of experience around personality, let alone the experience previously from running one of the world's finest drilling companies in Transocean. So from that experience, we are willing to share that with you so that you can then take that out and make yourself a practitioner, and we would support you 100%. In fact, recently, we've taken up to 20 people through to become practitioners here in the UK, already getting some fantastic leverage. So again, we will support that 100%. Why should people come to an E-Colours awareness event, Lewis?
Well, I will tell you, in the States, we actually work with a guy who has horses, and the horses have their E-Colours, which is a whole other story. But we call those events seeing is believing. And that's why you should come to one of the E-Colours events with Mark, is because you can read about it, you can go online and all the rest of it. But when you are in an event where you are realizing that, oh, I'm not the only person like me, there are other E-Colour combinations, the aha moments come thick and fast. And I have yet to see anybody come out of a session and not suddenly realize what they've been missing in their lives one way or another. And from there, once you have that experience, the seed is laid.
The breakout rooms alone are worth seeing, aren't they? When you break people out into reds, yellows, greens, and blues just as a top colour, it's actually amazing to watch. As you say, people are having these light bulb moments and really enjoying them as well. Ultimately, as far as I'm concerned, health and safety can be a rather dry subject from time to time. But if you bring in the E-Colours, it makes it so much more engaging. And you do that in any walk of life or anywhere where there's people. Essentially, it becomes engagement, and you're no longer guessing. You understand each individual in a much more aware and much deeper way, which is very important. How do you see the future of personality diversity?
I think it's more necessary today than ever. And I think COVID had a lot to do with that as well. I still talk to people every day who either they or somebody in their family has been impacted by the loneliness of not being able to communicate. And ultimately, regardless of our E-Colour combination, we're social animals. And, for a lot of kids particularly, a huge chunk of their lives was taken away from them at a very significant part of their lives. And so to me, I think, look, if everybody who ever listened to this is skeptical, it's a little bit like here in Spain, we are getting close to Christmas, and there are people going, oh, I'll never win the lottery. Well, have you bought a ticket? And it's the same thing here. You should give yourself the opportunity to at least see what's going on, what it's about, and I would be very surprised if you come away disappointed.
I agree. I've never seen anyone come away from a session. I've actually had a round of applause quite often at the end of a behavioural safety induction, which if you're a safety professional, you're a safety professional, knowing that you get a round of applause at the end of a training session, that is quite something. And so, yeah, I think it's a very, very powerful thing. What's the golden rule of life, Lewis?
Well, this actually came, I got to be honest, I read it in a book years ago called The Platinum Rule. Well, the golden rule in life, as you well know, is treat people as you would like to be treated, which is great if they happen to be like you. But it really doesn't. So just from a top color perspective, that probably means about 75% of the people aren't getting what they need. So the platinum rule life is treat people as they need to be treated. And the more you learn about the E-Colours and the associated tools, the more effective you will become at doing that. And it starts right there in one's own family, because again, very few families that I've ever met all have the same E-Colour combination. And so just say people have got 2 or 3 kids and, oh, why aren't you like your brother? Or why aren't you like your sister type thing? So it literally starts right there. But then for every individual who you get to come across in life, if they are intentionally treated the way they need to be treated, wouldn't life be great?
You wrote a book which is called At the End of the Day. Here, Lewis Senior and Laura Senior, you and your daughter. And one of the things I remember was two things I really remember. One, you writing this book made it okay for me to write my book, because the things you shared in there was not dissimilar to things I share in my book. So I thought it was very, very relevant. But you also said in here that you were never going to have another argument. That was something you decided upon. Give us a little bit on that as well.
Well, it's interesting, actually. In fact, I was on a call with a guy from Australia last night who was trying to argue with me because I'd never had an argument. but the reality is, my wife is predominantly blue-green, a wonderful human being. We've been married for 44 years. I've never had an argument with her. I am not argumentative by nature. However, towards the end of my oil field career back in the 90s, the drilling company that I used to work for started buying other companies. And so, and I was in HSE then. And we were the ones who were going to be, the management system was going to be our management system. Now you're trying to get other people to buy in. They already don't like management system, and now you're trying to buy in somebody else's. So I used to argue on behalf of the company all the time. And then I realized in about 2002, after an event that happened in my life, I'm just not going to have any more arguments. And I can honestly say, to this day, I've never, ever had another argument in the last 20 odd years. And the amount of times I see people, I do a lot of traveling. You go to an airport, it's suddenly announced the plane's late because of a mechanical problem. And you see people go up to the counter and berate the poor human being who's only passing on the information, And often I go over and go, look, excuse me. See, I have no problem interrupting. I say, excuse me, but it's really not that lady's fault. And on top of that, just for the heck of it, I'd much rather we had a mechanical problem on the ground rather than 30,000 feet. So can you just back off? And so I do think that if you're not going to have an argument, you need to choose your conversations carefully. Just put it that way. Because it would be easy to fall into the trap of somebody tells me, your stuff is what I have not heard warm and fuzzy for at least 15 years. But I used to hear that a lot. Oh, your stuff's warm and fuzzy. And at one point, I probably reacted to that. But again, not anymore. I just, if I think arguing to me is a waste of energy, as is getting annoyed or disappointed or angry. So for the last 20 years, I can tell you, I've never got angry. I've never got disappointed. I have never allowed myself to get disappointed or angry ever again. And here I am, I'm 72 years old, and other than the cold, I'm doing great.
I totally take on your point. What you give out is what you get back. And I do remember you sharing a great story about you traveling home from Australia with heavy luggage, obviously, as your mother had recently passed away. And you were traveling back with heavy luggage, and you were ready to check in, ready to pay extra money for the luggage, and the person behind the counter said, I'm going to charge you X amount of $100 or whatever. And you said, okay. And you went to get out your card to pay. And she said, are you not going to complain? And you said something like, no. And she said, well, in that case, you can have it for free. I'm not going to, I'm not going to charge you because you're not having a go at me.
Right.
It's great. It's a similar kind of story. And
yeah.
Very, very powerful. Do you have any thoughts about the legacy that you're creating, and what are you grateful for now and in the future?
So in the book, if you were to read at the end of the day, you will find out that in 2002, I was lying on the floor thinking I was dying. And as I was laying there, I was not very happy with the legacy I realized that I'd left. And so I decided to do several things differently. So if I now fast forward, there's an interesting podcast on the BBC now called Good and Bad Billionaires. And basically they pick billionaires, and then through a series of learning about how they got there, they then judge them at the end. And, everything from Bezos to this one, that one, the other one. And you've got, in fact, last week was probably one of the most startling ones to me. Because it was about Microsoft and about Bill Gates, And only because he'd given $55 billion away did they actually judge him as okay. And the reason is because along the way, he'd been extremely forceful in the things that he believed in, to a point of, upsetting other people. I have no intention of leaving $55 billion. At the end of the, and I don't say that in a silly way. I think, to me, the legacy that I am most grateful for is what we're doing today. You, Mark, having the opportunity to work with yourself and Emma and all of the other people who, as I think you said it very well, you can be interested or you can be committed. I would like to spend my time, or what's left of my time, with people who are as committed as we are to spread the E-Colours to as many people as they can get to. Because I go back to what I said earlier on, I truly believe it can be used as a coping tool. And life is not going to get any easier in the next few years. God knows what's going to happen, with all of the stuff that's going on around the world. And so I'm just grateful that I'm staying healthy enough to be able to pass on what we're passing on to everybody. And super grateful, Mark, for what you and Emma have done, because, I would dare say when Emma first met us, she was somewhat more doubtful and skeptical than you were. And I think we've come a long way with that. So to me, this is as good as it gets. And, we'll touch as many people as we can, and we'll continue to seek as many different ways of doing that as we can.
And I would like to say that we're just warming up, Lewis. We're just warming up. So, there's a lot more, still to achieve. But I've seen the power of this information change people's lives in a one-to-one basis, in people that I coach around the globe, in a group basis, in training, teamwork training or safety training, resolving conflict, understanding each other. Very, very powerful what you've created from wonderful inspiration from some fantastic people that we've already spoken about as well, and the gratitude that we show throughout our company and our lives. So brilliant work, Lewis. I just want to say thank you so much for this morning, or thank you so much for this time. Lots of people are going to get lots and lots of value out of this. Long may it continue.
Excellent. Thank you. And again, as you know very well, if I'm not sleeping or flying, if anybody wants to know more, they can get an answer from me almost immediately. Yeah.
And I do smile at that, because you can use the internet on the plane, but I understand that that's your personal time, so it's fine. But if they want to, it's
my only opportunity to binge watch.
I put the internet on the plane as well, so you can get me when I'm on the plane as well. But anyway, all good, Chris. Thank you so much for your time.
My privilege. Take care.